Japan Poison Information Center medical director. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude in allowing me the opportunity to speak at this conference. On the morning of March 20, 1995, 15 stations of the Tokyo subway system were filled with a noxious substance, later identified as a diluted form of sarin. A total of 5 subway commuter cars were affected during the Monday morning rush hour. According to traffic white paper, the capacity of subway trains between 8 a.m. and 8:40 a.m. reaches more than 200%. Passengers cannot read open newspapers, only magazines. The attack occurred at approximately 7:55 a.m. According to later police announcements, the terrorists, who respectively carried a diluted sarin solution in plastic bags into the subway trains and simultaneously stuck the sharpened tip of an umbrella into the box containing sarin. Criminal members are, the Omu Shindikyo religious cult. There were 13 fatalities and 5,000 and 500 more persons were sickened. You can see the policemen. This is a policeman. The policeman did not use protective equipment even while he was standing in front of the box, sarin box. The sarin was released. And soon after suffering chemical exposure, he collapsed. St. Lucas International Hospital in Tokyo is a private hospital having 520 beds and was founded in 1902 by American Dr. Toysler from Virginia. New hospital facilities were in full operation in May 1992. St. Lucas International Hospital is located near one of the most affected subway stations, Tsukiji Station, about 5 minutes on foot. Therefore, the hospital received the greatest number of patients within the Tokyo area, 640 patients. This slide shows the location of St. Lucas Hospital. You can see. This slide shows an emergency treatment quarter at the Tsukiji station, where we can see the enormous number of ambulances. There were no field decontamination when the attack occurred. The Tokyo Metropolitan Ambulance Control Center was in a chaotic state on the day of the attack, and its information systems was almost bursting at its seams. No victims were intubated at site. All severely ill patients received tracheal intubation and adequate ventilation after admission to hospitals. When the first emergency call from the Tokyo Metropolitan Ambulance Control Center of the fire department came into our emergency center at 8:16 a.m., it was reported that there has been a gas explosion at a subway station. We therefore started to prepare for burns and carbon monoxide poisoning. At 8:28 a.m., the first patient complaining of eye pain and visual darkness arrived at the emergency department on foot from the subway stations. The first ambulance arrived at 8:43. In the first hour, about 500 patients, including 3 dead on arrival patients, were rushed to the emergency department. The directors of the hospital declared our disaster-oriented system, which included canceling all routine operations and outpatient examinations, at 9:20. More than 100 doctors and 300 nurses and volunteers were mobilized to care for the patients. These slides shows the entrance of the emergency department and the outpatient department and an emergency accommodation area on the day of the attack. The hospital chapel, the founder's name, Toysler Hall, was used as an emergency accommodation area. The chapel is designed to be an accommodation area in emergencies and has oxygen, compressed air, and inspiration outlets. However, ventilation in this area was poor, and as a result, 45.8% of the medical staff complained of eye pain or mycosis. This slide shows secondary exposure percentages for various medical staff and locations. Sickness due to secondary exposure was mild. Ventilation should be well planned at the time a hospital is designed. This was relieved by improving the ventilation and rotating them out of the chapel. Among 640 patients who arrived at our hospital on the day of the attack, 164 came on foot, 120 by taxi, and only 35 by ambulances. Especially radio-controlled taxis played a remarkable role in the transportation of patients, and their ability to collect information cannot be ignored. After this attack, a new disaster report taxi system was initiated. The patients ranged in age from 8 years old to 65 years old, with an average age was 35. There were 395 male patients and 245 female patients, including 5 pregnant women and 13 children. At St. Luke's Hospital, triage was done mainly in the emergency department. We divided victims into 3 categories: mild ambulatory victims who presented only with only eye symptoms, moderate non-ambulatory victims who presented with other systemic signs and symptoms, and severe victims needing mechanical ventilation. Mild patients were closely observed with an IV line for several hours in the outpatient department and sent home. Moderate patients were admitted to ward. Severe patients were moved to our ICU. The number of mild cases with only eye symptoms who were released after a half-day observation was 528. The number of moderate cases with other systemic signs and symptoms who were admitted was 107. The number of severe cases requiring tracheal intubation and artificial ventilation was 5. The signs and symptoms on admissions are listed. The most prominent sign was meiosis, followed by headache, visual darkness, eye pain, dyspnea, nausea, cough, throat pain, and blurred vision. The most significant change in chemical laboratory data was low plasma cholinesterase values. As for other chemical laboratory data, 11% of the patients had higher than normal CPK values. Blood cells counts showed leukocytosis. In assay of arterial blood gas, many cases showed respiratory alkalosis with the exception of the determinable patients. Of the 57 cases who had an electrocardiogram taken, 4 cases showed a mild QT elongation without necessity of therapy, and 4 cases had bradycardia, which reported well to sulfuric, which well responded to sulfuric atropine. This slide shows the distribution of plasma cholinesterase levels. The severity of the patient's conditions correlates closely with the plasma cholinesterase levels. We thought that the cause of the patient's illness was some kind of organic phosphorus, which is often caused by agricultural chemicals by meiosis. We were puzzled as to why it had happened in the subway. The situation resembled in the Matsumoto Sarin incident in June 1994. The low cholinesterase values, the signs and the symptoms, the information from doctors concerned with Matsumoto Sarin incident, and advice from the Ground Self-Defense Forces Hospital led to a diagnosis of a nerve gas agent poisoning. At 11, TB told that the cause material is sarin, according to the police official announcement. In 2 to 4 days, 95% of the patients recovered and were subsequently discharged with satisfactory relief from their complaints. This slide shows the outcome of the admitted cases. Wait for a moment. Sorry. St. Luke's Hospital on the day of the attack. This video was filmed by a crew making educational films for nurses. This shows the chaotic state of the entrance to the emergency department immediately following this attack. Let's see again. This woman was in cardiopulmonary arrest on arrival. She was brought to the hospital by a Tokyo Metropolitan Fire Department minivan. This is a police patrol car, and he is the director of the hospital, Dr. Hinohara, a very famous doctor in Japan. And you can see the taxis. Many seriously injured victims were taken to hospital by private cars belonging to passing Good Samaritans. Shoes were scattered. The available stretchers and wheelchairs were gathered from all over the hospital to the entrance of the emergency department. And you can see the police patrol car guiding the police van. The van is transporting the walking wounded. Numerous press helicopters are hovering above. And next come the ambulances. It can be seen that no decontamination procedures in and underway, and the protective equipment is not in use. This is a pregnant woman. The doctor says OBGYN doctor should come, he said. This is the director of the hospital, Dr. Hinohara, who takes charge of the responses. This gentleman is the deputy chief of the hospital. He directs the sorting of the victims. Dr. Hinohara. This red car is from the Tokyo Metropolitan Fire Department. These individuals are the officers collecting information from the hospital. The deputy chief of the hospital asked the officer, what chemicals was used in this attack? The officers replied, acetonitrile. was retrospectively proved to be incorrect. Uh, this woman is complaining of a broad vision. This is the interior view of the hospital. This clock distributes kidney basins for the victims who are vomiting. Okay. And from now on, from this point, the presentations onwards, I would like to describe the chemical disaster response system from 7 different, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 different angles: initial treatment, primary care, mass decontamination system, and the PPEs, and the detection and the analysis, and the information system under condition coordination. Under Japanese law, EMT, emergency medical technicians, are not allowed to maintain our patients' airway using an endotracheal tube or to administer drugs to the victims of the chemical attack at the site of the incident. This law has changed after the Sarin attack, but EMTs can intubate and give epinephrine or atropine only for cardiopulmonary arrest patients. Doctor should become more actively involved in the treatment of victims before they reach the hospital environment. However, even now in Japan, doctors are not actively are involved in the treatment of chemical disaster victims outside the hospital setting. Until now, in Japan, warm zone medical procedure, for example, auto-injectors, tracheal intubations, are not introduced. And you know, the on-site decontamination lotion as reactive skin decon lotion, RSDL. In the States, RSDL can be, RSDL is, everybody can buy RSDL, for example, the Amazon site. In Japan, we cannot use the RSDL, and after the 25 years of Tokyo subway Sarin attack, nothing changed in the medical field. And the Japanese mobile mass decontamination. This system consists of the inflatable tent, 2 decontamination lines, a warm water supply, air conditioning, and lighting. Official decontamination guideline In March 2004, the Fire and Disaster Management Agency assembled the specialists in the field to form the study group on decontamination in NBC emergencies, which proposed a more practical model for decontamination following terrorist attacks involving chemicals. The model provides criteria for decontamination depends on whether the causative agent is visible or whether the victims are ambulatory. This is the Japanese official standard of decontamination. You can see the a primary triage was done, and at first, walkable or unwalkable, we divided the patients, and if you see the causal materials or something irritation happened, we use water. Wet water decontamination is the most popular decontamination all over the world, especially in the civilian protection field. Firefighters take a lead in the field decontamination. Firefighters are accustomed to use water and like water decontamination, but wet water decontamination requires time, labor, feed water, and drainage equipment, space, clothes, and protection or privacy. Now I would like to introduce the Japanese new technology of decontamination, wind decontamination. Decontamination is a late controlling and time-consuming steps. Even dry decontamination, which is basically changing the clothes of the victims, takes significant time. Therefore, in order to expedite the decontamination process, Japanese researchers create an original and unique window decontamination system, window decon. Using window decon, ambulatory victims enter our window tunnel and are exposed to wind speed of over 25 meters per second, which is fast enough to expel any noxious gases that may be trapped beneath the clothes. This system can be decontaminate hundreds of victims per hour. This window decon system has already been put into practical use by thermal power plants in Japan for removing dioxin particles from the clothing of utility workers. And the indication of the window decon, non-persistent agent, mild victims who can walk and obey instructions. No use for persistent agent and severe patients. This is a window decontamination system. Benefits of the window decontamination system: easy to protect privacy, lightweight, short period for decontamination, effective to remove aerosols, powder, and particle materials. And you can see the virtual mannequin and real mannequin researchers of window decon. And this is researchers' literature. And the next, Before the Sarin attack took place, insufficient PPE was provided both on site at the chemical incidents and within the hospital environment. After the attack, the Japanese Ministry of Welfare distributed the PPEs to hospitals throughout Japan, but only 4 sets were provided in each case. In contrast, the fire and the police authorities and Japanese Federal Defense Forces do have sufficient PPEs. Detection and analysis. Before the Sarin attack, chemical disaster task force team of the Metro Tokyo Maritime Fire Defense Agency included on-site analysis personnel even before the first Sarin attack. However, during the Sarin incident, they were unable to identify sarin since the chemicals were not included in their library of possible substances. On the other hand, Metropolitan Police Agency was able to identify the agent involved as sarin within 3 hours due to the benefit of information collected during the Matsumoto Sarin incident. After the Sarin attack, many analytic systems were introduced, and information system under coordination. Before the Sarin attack, there were 2 poison information centers in Japan. There was no information system against chemical disaster. After the Sarin attack, the Japanese government compiled a list of key personnel with expertise and the management of the chemical disaster incidents. Regular meetings have been convened, and the mailing list has been set up. Non-governmental mailing lists exist, and the Japanese government has created a chemical terrorism management model. And this model, the Japanese Political Information Center, was become the national coordinator of information on chemical disaster management. This is the Japanese government's NBC terrorism management model. The Japanese, at this model, Japan Poison Information Center become our information coordinator. And the last, the necessity of international communication in case of chemical terrorism. At first, when spreading damage across the border is thought, the second, the one response is in the country is church is very difficult and complicated, and the independent country cannot resolve the problem autonomously and demands relief from each country. And the third, when it is thought that there might be a simultaneously attack to various countries to arouse attention. And thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you very much.